Okay,
Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Robert Massey, and I'm Deputy Executive Director of the Royal Astronomical Society. And thank you for inviting me here today. I'd like to make the case to the committee for an inquiry into Plan S. This is the unprecedented imposition of a new model for scientific publishing that's led to serious concerns from research scientists, scientific publishers, and university libraries, all of whom should be witnesses if an inquiry goes ahead, along with those pushing the plan forward. The UK has a 20% global share of the scientific publishing industry. It directly supports around 3,000 jobs, with obviously a larger number dependent on it, and has an export value of £1.4 billion. It is our view that the Plan S may put this at risk. To give you the background, Plan S is the push by the so-called Coalition S, a group of 13 research funding organisations and 3 foundations across Europe, to effectively force the scientists they fund to publish using the gold open access model, where authors pay to publish from the 1st of January next year. UKRI is a member of that coalition, so this is set to happen regardless of Brexit. Why do we want an inquiry? Well, this is an example of one-size-fits-all approach to policy making. It assumes that researchers are unwilling to move to this open access model. It assumes that publishers are inflexible in their approach. And this radical decision was announced in August last year without consulting the scientific community or scientific publishers. So representing the Royal Astronomical Society, I'm not going to pretend to speak for all of our peers in other disciplines. What I can tell you is about the behaviour of those we represent, astronomers and geophysicists. Astronomers were among the first groups to embrace the internet, and from as early as 1991 they began to post their papers on the fully open access repository archive, which allows anybody, public, scientists, to read those papers. And these days, virtually all of those researchers now do this. There is almost nobody, certainly in the industrialised world, who would not follow that model. So open access is already a working thing for this group. Earth Archive covers geophysics in the same way, although that's been slower to get going. And by a simple research over the weekend, I think there are something like 200 covering other subject disciplines. In short, the scientists want to move to an open access model. There is no resistance on their part to do this, and they embrace sharing their work. Our journals, published by a not-for-profit, Oxford University Press, actively encourage them to do that. There is no barrier on our part either. So the issue is actually what this does to the process of paying for their work to be published. Journal subscriptions at the moment pay for the necessary management of this process, including peer review, that allows the ecosystem to function and allows people to present and read their work and for it to be acknowledged and criticised and so on. But the authors of Plan S, do not seem to understand this. They don't understand that there is this mixed model of so-called hybrid journals, where some people subscribe, some people, if they really want to, can pay, although I don't think it's necessary, one which is favoured by research scientists. 52% of UK research outputs already are available through an open access model. We're leading the world in this already without the need for this additional plan, or at least the recommendations of the plan, to impose this fundamental change on the system. If it goes ahead, it will certainly be disruptive. Publishers need an income stream to run their journals. So Plan S will force OUP and many other publishers to move to a gold model where a researcher might be faced with a bill of, say, £1,000, perhaps several £1,000s to publish their work. Now, what will we say to a researcher, for example, working without a grant, and there are many, who makes a significant discovery, and then they have to go to their university and ask for a large sum of money just to publish that work? They simply may not be able to do it. Who is the gatekeeper for it? Is it someone holding the grant? Is it the university library? That's the case in some institutions. Is it somebody in the university management? And how are they qualified to make that decision? I think it's clear that this will be a very fraught process, that it will compromise the process of bringing science into the public domain. And if it isn't accessible, or there is an incentive by some journals to push stuff out because it's a money-making system, then you run the risk of lowering public trust in science as well if you compromise peer review. Now, it would be disingenuous of me not to say that there isn't an interest on our part in this, because scientific publishing supports learned societies like our own, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. What I will say is that the revenues that we have pay for various activities like public engagement, scientific meetings, seed funding for research, travel grants for early career researchers, and actually in our case we run a significant library on it as well. We are a charity with a clear understanding of public benefit. But I think this is a massively disruptive change to the model, and I think it needs more political scrutiny that I don't think has been there at this point so far. I am aware of the correspondence that the Chair's had with the Science Minister on this. So at the very least, such a significant and transformative move needs greater oversight, and I've asked the committee to look into this in more detail.
Thank you very much indeed. Do you imagine that it would take one evidence session, or do you imagine something longer than that?
I think you need at least one evidence session with witnesses representing those who are pushing the plan forward and those who have expressed concerns. I wouldn't necessarily say, for example, we as a small learned society should be one of the witnesses, but I certainly think the larger the society should be, because they're very familiar with this too. I think you need representatives from research scientists, because that's the voice that's been missing in this as well.
And you do accept that there's something of a conflict of interest in that you have
for us,
financial...
yes, absolutely yes, and but we are there also as a voice of researchers, and I think even if necessary, I think we certainly could convene researchers independent of ourselves and ask them to give evidence too.
Stephen, and then Vicky and Martin, I think.
Thank you. You said at the beginning of your presentation, which I thought was excellent, thank you, that you didn't speak for the other societies. But there must be a conversation going on, because I think we're all aware of the important work that the various societies do to support their members, and a lot of that funding, as you rightly point out, does come through publishing. How wide an issue do you think this is, and is it common amongst all societies, or does it vary depending on size?
I think it affects virtually all societies that represent research scientists if they have a publishing arm. It's impossible to see otherwise. Some of them already have gold journals that tick along, and actually we could, if we had to, on this short time scale, move to that. Our concern, it might even financially benefit us, but the problem is the impact it has on the research scientists. We do have that understanding that it's not just about maximising our revenue stream from this.
And that there is
absolutely, there are conversations going on. It is a common issue. There is the ALPSB, Association of Learned and Professional Society Publishers, for example, that are making representations on this, as well as the Publishers Association.
Thank you.
Vicky?
As I understand the logic of Plan S, it says that if research is being publicly funded, it should be free to view. And if it's going to be free to view, then somebody needs to pay the publishing costs, so therefore you have to pay to publish it. If your biggest concern is where's the money going to come from to pay to publish, then can we sort this? Because in Walport's letter, or in the Minister's letter, he says that Walport will be coming up with a funding mechanism. So I guess my question is, do we need to do a full review, or do we just need to have an intense discussion with the Minister to say you cannot move to Plan S until it's clear to researchers where the cash is coming from to fund this?
There's two aspects to that. Firstly, yes, if you're in receipt of a UKRI grant, then you can envisage a system where part of that grant covers this, although there will be some tensions, because I guess it'll be how much of a grant you want to spend on publishing papers. If you work in a field that demands a lot of papers are put out, then it's going to be more expensive. I worry, though, about those who are not in receipt of that funding, because they won't be able to access it.
And next question, are we in sync with other countries? Because a number of times I've stood up in the House of Commons and said we lead the world in the amount of peer-reviewed, published journals were the best, and I don't want to suddenly find we're doing something no one else is doing.
We are. I think we're very far ahead in open access, but it is the critical point that I think is missing from Plan S is an understanding of these free subject repositories that already exist. In the UK, there was quite a push to encourage universities to create them because that benefited the institution. Actually, if you work in a particular field, what you want to do is look at an online repository where you see your work.
Can we hang on, Vicky? We're going very tight on time.
Which is the point is that you can put things in those repositories for nothing at the same time as publishing. And actually, that's what we do. I think more and more publishers are okay with that model.
Thank you, Martin, and then Sam. Martin, hang on, Martin first, then Sam.
Sorry. Partly answered my question, but you did raise in your submission, you talked about a risk to the quality of peer review. Can you just explain that a little bit?
Yeah, the risk is that you see more... Well, firstly, there's an incentive to publish. If you have a system where you are asking for article processing charges for someone to put a paper in. Now, arguably, that charge would be paid whether or not the paper is published. In practice, however, it's very easy to see that it incentivises journals to accept them. And there may be less reputable ones that come into existence, which is already happening to an extent, that then simply accrue fees from people. They're rather lower. Everything gets published. You undermine peer review in doing that.
Thank you. Sam?
Are we too far down the track with this to actually for an inquiry to make a difference? And to the extent that you want an inquiry to this, is it really about defending the revenue stream, or do you think there's a public policy interest at stake?
I don't think we're too far down the track, given that the decision was announced before we had an opportunity to run an inquiry. I'm not even suggesting necessarily that the decision should be reversed entirely, but what I would say is that there are core details of this that are very disruptive that need to be looked at in more detail. From our perspective, yes, of course, I've said explicitly we have a revenue stream from this, so we are conflicted. But my view is that there is an issue for the wider research community as a whole. Irrespective of what it does to our membership and our revenue stream, there will be researchers that could be very disadvantaged by this. It's not about just, say, low-income countries, but people without grants. What will they do?
Thank you very much, Robert. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.